Without further ado, um, Karen Doll, thank you so much for coming on. Your book was wonderful.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
Oh, our pleasure, our pleasure. And we've been trying to get this in for a while, so excited to actually finally do it. Um, your book, Psychological Fitness: How High Performers Achieve with Ease. First of all, how did you? Because I know you've had over 25 years of experience as a psychologist and working with people in various different capacities. How did the book come about, and specifically the niche of how to help high performers? How did that idea come about?
Yes, so I do a lot of coaching. I am a licensed psychologist, but I've always operated in the consulting coaching space. And so during COVID, I had there was a high need for psychological help, and so I had a high volume of clients at that time, and was struck by, of course, the struggle that I was hearing about, and the languishing, and the fear, and the anxiety, and all of the things that we were all going through at that time in 2020. And what struck me the most was that people, despite this being a universal experience, people were really feeling alone and like seeming like they're the only one struggling. And so I also just, in our community fielded a lot of phone calls of people reaching out and asking for help and being concerned about their loved ones or their kids doing school at home or their spouses dealing with addiction, and there being, kind of a lack of resource for people. And so I had energy just around doing some psychoeducation and finding one pathway or another channel of getting this type of information out as kind of a addition, sort of do it yourself, make the information accessible for people to understand how they can have agency in their own sense of well-being and flourishing and mental health, and just to convey the message that, you're never the only one struggling.
Well, it's a powerful message. I think something I've learned or keep learning through life is everyone falls on a spectrum between I have agency over this thing, be it physical health, mental health, something in their life, or I don't. And actually, in the UK specifically, I think in the States it's a lot better. Most people live their lives in a way where nothing is malleable. My path is determined. My health isn't malleable. I've inherited the genes. My fate is fixed. I'm as clever as I'll ever be. And I think that mindset when it comes to mental health is quite self-limiting. How do you help people make the switch that there's so much more in their control?
Yeah, that's really powerful. And, also offering the disclosure, of course, we can't control everything. So, people get sick and people get cancer, and we don't necessarily have control over all of that. Yet it is really empowering to remind ourselves that we can respond in the face of whatever that thing is. We can respond in the face of whatever that adversity is. And that's great news, and it's empowering, yet it's also a great responsibility and sometimes a lot harder. So I agree that there's kind of a continuum and a spectrum, whether we want to call it fixed mindset, I'm bad at math, and then we just remain stuck there, or, to more extreme degrees, even victim mindset, where people just begin to kind of give up um, and become complacent in their suffering. And it's really challenging to get some people who are at that extreme end of the continuum to make that shift. And so, I mean, how do we do it? We do it over time and slowly, and making incremental steps and helping people see where there is progress. And
Mm.
some people can have aha moments. For most of us, I think it takes a long time, and it's just a continued journey. We
I
all have
appreciate
areas in our lives, where we can get stuck in that victim mindset, like, oh, this thing is happening to me.
definitely. Definitely. I mean, I
Hmm.
think everyone can resonate in their own way. I appreciated that you started the book off with this isn't a magic pill. This isn't going to be your magical
Hmm.
elixir, and it takes hard work. Like anything worth having in life takes a bit of hard work and a bit of struggle. So, for those who haven't heard of your book, who is the audience for the book, and what can they hope to learn through reading it?
It's funny, when I was selecting the title, I had a guy that was helping me. I did kind of hybrid publishing and helping me with publishing, and he did not like my title. building psychological fitness. And we went around and around about it. And he said, this just doesn't apply to me or someone like me. And I thought, doesn't this, we all have mental health. So a part of me thinks like this applies to everyone. This applies to all of us because we all need to manage our physical and mental health. But that doesn't, you know, lead to book sales specifically if we're just targeting it to everybody. So generally, the target audience would be the type of people that I work with, which are high performers with demanding lives. So that could be an adolescent, that could be an adult, it could be a senior leader, it could be a knowledge worker. And the subtitle, How High Performers Achieve with These, I didn't love as much, but what I was trying to do is draw upon the language of the people that I work with or the people that might be picking up a book like this. And so I interviewed a lot of people just around understanding their mental health challenges. What do they need? What do they want? What would they like? And the subtitle really came from those interviews that I did. I did 30-minute interviews. And it struck me because I think I even put this in the book or maybe in the intro that when I was doing all of these interviews, there were 27 people in a row who ended our call with, I just want to feel at ease. And so that language just struck me. And I tried to play around with it. Like, what is that? Is it equilibrium? Is it balance? And then I thought, no, I'm just going to use those words. That's what people want. They want to strive and they want to achieve and they want to be challenged and they want to grow without all the unnecessary distress. And so it's, you know, that finding that sweet spot of being engaged and having energy and vitality, but without the anxiety and distress.
Okay, so in my life, I'd like to consider I'm a high performance aspirational, right? I think it's more of a journey as opposed to a fixed destination. But my career, I guess, is sort of startups. So high performance environments, right? Usually you raise money and you've got to deliver for shells and things like this. And for me, high performance, there's a certain degree of stress and anxiety and pressure that comes with that. So is it oxymoronic to think that you can grow and achieve and stretch yourself mentally to grow and do it with ease and not feel that strain? Like where does that fit in together? If that makes sense.
I think that's the $1 million question. And I have to think and hope to think that yes, that is possible. That, you know, because it's not a matter of not having stress or not having tension, but when we get into that threshold of overexertion or burnout or what I, you know, always refer to as the unnecessary distress and chronic stress, that's the stuff that will really affect our health in the long term. So can we still achieve and do a lot and accomplish a lot and succeed or be have mastery in our functional areas of expertise without all of that? I believe that we can. I have to believe that we can. Everyone's threshold is going to be a little bit different, but it doesn't need to be binary. So really, it's about letting go of the unnecessary strain. So when people start having anxiety or they're not able to sleep or they're self-medicating because of all the emotional discomfort and stress, or they're not, you know, they're overexerting. I mean, that's when we get into kind of the problematic part of the continuum when it's having adverse impact.
And it's easy to get there, right? Because you're so close to it. Weeks turn into months turn into years, and suddenly you realize you've got some bad mental habits, maybe some bad mental hygiene, and it's a difficult knot to untie. So with the people you work with, the high performers you work with, what are the, obviously case by case, they're all different and very unique. What are the universals that they struggle with that you've found in your experience? And if we could speak to the universals, because I think maybe perhaps it might resonate with our audience, and what you come across on more of a day-to-day.
Sure. Yes, I would say some version of the not enough-isms. So whether that presents in a coaching session as I didn't get enough done. I haven't accomplished enough. I'm not far enough. I haven't been promoted soon enough. I'm not a good enough parent. I would say that would be the headliner. And it often shows up in productivity. People will come to coaching and the gap is I want to get more things done. I want to manage my time better, which to me is just usually like proxy for something a little more higher order. Because it isn't just about getting more stuff done. But that is often kind of the presenting symptom or the presenting challenge.
So
Just how much is enough?
So does someone, I guess, when you're doing coaching, do you find your role gets conflicted where they say they want to get more things done and you swim upstream and think, okay, well, why the insatiable need to get things done and never enough? Is that how you would tackle that? Or would you just try and rearrange their calendar? Like how would you deal with that?
I generally would not rearrange the calendar. I mean, there are tools and some things you can do certainly to optimize and to make things more efficient, but I'm not an organizing coach and
No.
I certainly shouldn't be coaching people on that. That is not my gift or strength. So, I try to, and it depends, of course, but I try to gently challenge the core belief, and to help people and all of us, remind all of us, we're all on the journey together, understand that that's just often like a fleeting, unattainable, unachievable thing in whatever version it's showing up. Like how much would be enough to get done today? Because as soon as we get to the bottom of that list, there's something else to be done. And so I try to just kind of challenge the mental model and uncover, is that an actual thing? Like, do I actually need to get these 3 tasks done because there's a deadline or my boss told me to, or I have to pick my kid up from school or whatever? Is that actual, or is it a phantom expectation?
Okay,
Because
so if I hate,
the phantom expectations often show up in like the shoulds. I should do this. I should work out more. I should get up earlier. I should do this thing. I should go visit my dad. I should network more, whatever the shoulds are. And often that is, just kind of can come from a perfectionist mindset of this goalpost that just is going to keep moving. And how much is enough and according to who? Because there generally isn't like a universal standard or metric of how much is enough stuff to get done.
And as you said, when there's always new things you can add to the list, right? You continuously make yourself busy and busy and busy. So how does psychological fitness play into that uncoupling of busyness for the sake of it?
Well, I mean, I think of psychological fitness as, well-being, and well-being plus. And so, part of psychological fitness is having a sense of purpose and positive mental health and having vitality and mental, social, emotional, cognitive well-being and all of the things all of the levers and the things that go into just like physical health. There are different elements of physical health, there are different elements of psychological health. I would say it's not a linear journey. It's not a linear journey of how do we get ourselves and help others understand that, we are not our achievements. And if we over identify, I mean, there are all kinds of words out there now to describe like successism and what used to be consumerism, where we would measure our status with like material goods. Now there's something called successism, which is we measure our status according to our achievements. And anytime there's a comparison involved, it's a losing proposition. Because how much is enough? Well, my peers over here are accomplishing this. There's always going to be somebody ahead. Always. So that the comparison is never helpful. I always say if we compare, we despair. And unfortunately, it's really hard not to do that.
Yeah, big time. Do you find men, which sex do it more? Do you find men compare more than females? Or, I mean, do you find any sex differences with that whole comparison piece?
Well, we all do it. And part of it is just our human condition. It's natural. It's we sort of can't help it. It's how we sort of figure out where we fit in the world. Um, and right now, we're kind of being hijacked with all of the social media. And not to say that all social media is bad, but it is very problematic for people that have the propensity and a tendency to compare and measure their self-worth based on external achievements, because it's everyone's highlight reels are everywhere we turn, and that part is not great for mental health. So we all do it. I think the research shows that females, particularly in adolescence, are more impacted by the effects of social media, and probably more around appearance and body image. And I think guys tend to be more threatened by things like physical achievement and professional achievement.
Yeah, there's very interesting evolutionary psychology rabbit holes around um, what males look for in what males look at in other males, and versus what females look at in other females, and the whole competitive dynamics, which
Yes.
get
Yep.
very
There's a
convoluted.
lot of
And
landmines. There are a lot of landmines there too.
yeah, big time, big time. And it's actually really depressing literature to read as well. It's such a cynical view of humanity. I don't like diving into it too much. And but it's kind of interesting some of the time. So what I found really fascinating is you're talking about this journey of sort of you're moving this external scorecard and you're working with people to bring it internal, right? So it's not about external achievement. Your self-worth isn't in your promotion. It isn't in your how your business is doing or whatever it is. um how do you shift one's perceptual self-worth from the external to the internal, and how easy is that?
A lot of I would say much of the therapeutic journey, whether you're working with a coach or a therapist, comes down to that. So whether it's somebody who's really stressed out because they have a demanding job, or somebody who's recovering from trauma, it often does come back to that very core thing. Like, we want to have self-acceptance and know that we're enough. And these things don't define us, whether it's a trauma or a job or a role. So how do you decouple it? That's where I think a lot of the deep psychological work takes place. And depending on where you are on that mental health continuum, therapists and clinicians and coaches just need to meet people where they are. So if somebody is in the red zone or an acute state with extreme symptoms, it's important to alleviate the symptoms first, and then again work on the either double click on the deeper order things or higher order, however you want to set that up. But if we're talking about high achievers and that kind of subset of the population, not necessarily people recovering from trauma, not that you can't be both, I think it's there's a challenge to say, who I am without this, what really does matter, and to engage in some existential work.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
the
whether that's when I'm 85 and I'm looking back on my life, what is this going to mean? And how do I want to live without regret? And what are my true values? What are my key values? And am I making daily, weekly, monthly choices that are in alignment with those? And I think that has to happen with organized processing and reflection, with the coach, with the therapist, or on one's own, doing
mm,
your own introspection.
mm. I think it helps when you've got a someone impartial talking to, who can sort of hold the mirror up and take you outside of your system. If you're too close to it in the weeds trying to figure it out yourself, at least in my experience, it can be very overwhelming and hard to see. So I can get the value
Yeah,
of
healthy
working with someone on that.
detachment.
Healthy
Yeah,
detachment, yes, that's
learning
a much more
learning a little
succinct.
healthy detachment, pulling back just a bit. And I in my own mind, I grapple with this because there's a part of me that feels like we're swimming upstream. Like, there are so many challenges in the world right now. Like, this is hard, and it's hard to make internal shifts, and we're conditioned in a particular way, and we're getting all these messages about fill in the blank. So the way I want to respond is, yeah, this change is hard. It takes a long time. It's a lifelong journey. And then there's also another part of me that's like, but why do we have to make it so hard? Maybe it doesn't need to be so hard.
Mm. Yeah, I thought about that
Maybe
recently.
shifting our mindset, yeah, shifting our mindsets, challenging our core beliefs. Maybe it doesn't need to be that hard, because if we continue telling ourselves, or if I continue telling myself how hard it is, that's just not helpful.
But it sounds like you need a certain level of awareness to be able to start this whole process. And I think, and this is just my opinion, I think smartphones bombard you with so much noise that it sort of changes the landscape of your head, your mind. So you're being bombarded with all this noise, and you can't. It's very hard to be aware of what you're thinking when you're being bombarded with tweets and Instagram and scrolls and YouTube and all this stuff. And I think there needs to be quiet and reflection before you can actually be aware of what's going on in your mind to figure it out. I mean, how do you think about that?
Mhm. Oh, absolutely. There is so much noise and static. And right now, the phones, as a tool, are not serving us. And again, I'm not saying that a tool can be used for generative purposes or destructive purposes. I don't think we have sorted out how to have healthy relationships with technology and with our smartphones. And that's controversial too. There are different points of view and schools of thought on that, but I think it's pretty clear that the research shows when smartphones came on the scene, there was like a rapid decline of mental health, increase of depression, suicide, anxiety, addiction, like any mental health challenge really that you can think of. And that was in around 2012, which was the introduction of the smartphone. Even more so than during COVID. So if you, Jonathan Haidt, who wrote The Coddling of the American Mind in his new book, The Anxious Generation, which is, I think, quite brilliant. Um, he and his team have looked at all of this data, and it's alarming. It's astounding and alarming. And I think the greatest impact, of course, is on malleable brains, of adolescents and pre-adolescents, that in a really important part of their human development, this tool has hijacked the process. And
Mm.
so it's like we're sort of swimming upstream. So there are a lot of movements that are trying to challenge that and tackle that and put some restrictions in place and get phones taken out of schools and whatnot. But I think it's really done a number to self-esteem. I think it's impacted people's self-esteem, of all ages, genders, backgrounds, socioeconomic categories, and we have some work to do.
I think
Static, noise, and our attention is so disrupted. And right now, many people that I work with come thinking, oh, I have ADD because I feel distracted all the time. And that could be, but we don't all have ADD. And so there is a difference between being interrupted all day by notifications and pings and Slack messages and instant messages and reminders, and becoming distracted. There is a difference.
Mm, yeah, I think that resonates a lot. I mean, friends saying, "Oh, I've suddenly got ADD." It's like, no, you don't. You're just completely wiring your brain to just change context all the time between all your different apps and pings. And what scares me about, I mean, there's a bit of a tangent, but what scares me about it all is the short form video content. I mean, you can go on I
Mhm.
saw someone on a bus the other day, and weren't even looking at what they were looking at. They were just scrolling 1 second, 2 seconds, scrolling 1 second, and it was never ending. The TikTok kind of format. That scares me because it reminds me of something I read about the casinos, that the
Yes.
90% of gambling addictions were on roulette, and then the next year after virtual roulette got released, so the virtual equivalent of the game, which means you could play more games in a minute, 90% the next year were virtual slot machines. And just the introduction of more what they call event frequency led to way more addiction. And actually that short form content, I feel like, is a like for like comparison. But social media
There's
aside,
research to support that.
yeah, well,
Yeah, there
terrifying.
is that is There's research to support that. Yeah, and this
Mm,
is what technology companies are doing. They're reading motivational science, and it's like a big Skinner box.
mm. Well, you have your work cut out for you then, Karen. I mean, that's you really do. So, psychological fitness. What is the biggest misconception around psychological fitness?
Yeah, well, I think we've made a lot of progress in the last few years with mental health awareness. But whether the world of psychology and mental health, some people still think like, oh, this doesn't apply to me because I don't have a mental illness. And so I think just that notion and that awareness that we all have mental health, it's not just like we all have physical health. So I'm mostly physically healthy. I don't have chronic disease. I don't have acute pain, but I do have some ailments. You know, my knee hurts and sometimes my back hurts. I'm 50 and these things can come up, but in mental health is similar. I'm mostly mentally healthy. I don't have a pathology. I don't have a clinical diagnosis at this time, but I get anxiety. I get stressed out. I feel depressed sometimes. And so just the idea that it applies to all of us and there are levers and things that we can do to enhance our psychological health and move up the continuum.
Mm. It's
So
fun,
people can flourish with a mental illness also.
really. How so?
If treat your mental illness, you know, there are plenty of people with treated mental illness that are flourishing. It's
Mm.
when people don't get treated and address the symptoms, if they're acute enough, then they can, you know, get in the way of that.
I liked the terminology psychological fitness because it resonated. Because anyone can, if you've been a runner or whatever, when it comes to physical fitness, whatever the pursuit, you can understand that you can take a couple of weeks off and you're not as fit as you were a couple of weeks before. And when I read it, I went back through my life and I could understand of when I've been more psychologically fit than when I've been more psychologically unfit. And when you're psychologically fit, you feel like, okay, you've got the tools readily available in your head to deal with life and the ups and downs and everything. And it's easier to keep your equanimity. But it seems like when people have been, or I've been psychologically or unfit, keeping that equanimity is harder. And that equanimity piece seemed to be the sort of crux of it. Is I'm
Mhm.
psychologically fit when I can keep my equanimity. The highs aren't too high; they'll pass. The lows, all good. This is just part of life. You'll get through it. But the deviation of that kind of equanimity was harder when I've been more psychologically unfit. So how do you actually go about working with people to build psychological fitness, like the actual tools that you work with them to get there?
Sure. So you're reinforcing the idea that, you know, we can train for it. So that's the good news and the bad news, right? It requires a little bit of effort and shift, but we can train for it, just like physical fitness. So we, you know, self-awareness, like you mentioned, it all begins there. So self-discovery and self-awareness, if we don't know ourselves, how are we going to change if we don't know what to change? So that is the first step. And then there are different avenues and modalities in to make internal changes, whether it's coaching or therapy. So there are, you know, what we call top-down strategies where we can look at our thinking, modifying our mental models. We see things as we are, not as they are. So looking at core beliefs, looking at training our thoughts, looking at what are healthy thoughts, what are damaging thoughts, and looking at, you know, a cognitive avenue in and making those adjustments, then can change some of the other things. Getting emotional literacy is helpful. So getting a little more accuracy into understanding our feelings. Feelings are a little harder to change than thoughts. So changing and adapting our thinking tends to be a little bit more effective rather than, you know, think of telling myself not to feel a certain way doesn't really work.
As
But getting
opposed to,
emotional literacy and understanding our feelings and what are our patterns, what are things that trigger us, even though that word has been overused, but you know, what are the things that tend to lead to a cascade of negative thoughts and negative or unpleasant feelings. Um, and unpacking that is helpful. Bottom up strategies would be a little more somatic or body based. So whether it's, you know, learning how to cultivate calm, So anything around mindfulness or meditation or yoga or movement, physical activity helps psychological fitness. So they're all different avenues in to help enhance well-being. And again, it's like there's my book has a lot of research in it, and I intended to try and also make it really practical for people who don't want the research. So if you don't want to read the research, look at what is the key point, and here is your challenge. So it isn't like do all the things. It's sort of here are a menu of options of things that are science based and have proven to be helpful. And then figure out kind of what your own recipe is and which things are most effective for you. For me, physical exercise is really important for stress management. I think it probably is for everybody. But I know if I do not work out for 3 days, I'm agitated for sure.
Me too. The days everyone's looking for the pill that they can wake up and take, and they're just the best version of themselves. They're articulate, they're charming, they're smart, they're funny, they're getting stuff done. And that, I think the closest pill to that is exercise. But that pill doesn't exist.
Mhm.
But actually just sweating in the morning and then starting your day is as close as you'll get, in my opinion, I think. You talked about
I
sort of,
agree.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah, I
I
mean,
was gonna say that I agree, and it's a well-being elevator. I mean, and natural hormones in the body and all of that. But we talked, I think, before we hit record on this, that like you said, I try to say in the book, like, not to overpromise and not say, because there's so much in the world of self-development that's like, just do these 5 tips and then you're going to be happy, or just do this one thing and then life is going to be good. And that isn't how it works. And I think that can be damaging, because then people do the 5 tips and their world isn't great and they're not happy and living happily ever after. And then they think they're faulty for some reason.
yeah, yeah.
So it's good to have hope and promise that there are some things we can do. And we do like the easy way. I read something that Andrew Huberman said recently, which is something along the lines of everybody wants to be told that a good life is just right around the corner.
They do. I mean, I think it's a problem though, because me and my friend have been talking about this for a while, but it's the short term easy. The short term easy is the painful path in the long run, and the painful path in the immediate term is the really satisfying life. And it's choosing that discipline and the discomfort and the not pain in the literal sense, more the metaphorical, doing the thing that you don't want to do, right? It's not fun to
Hmm.
wake up in an early morning and exercise, but you're going to feel good after. Um, with all these tools and psychological, I guess mental models, reframings, self-regulation you talk about in the book, which I particularly like that. Enjoyed that chapter. I feel that when I read the book, I left with the feeling of, okay, here are all these tools. I have no idea what's going to work for you, but try them with the challenges and see what works for you and repeat what works, right? But you have to try them to know if they're going to work. Have I got that right?
Yes,
Okay.
it's all just an experiment. And one thing that I did not mention yet, focusing on the thoughts and the emotions and the exercise and whatnot, but the idea of social connection and social fitness is a really critical part of psychological fitness. Um, so there's a lot of long-term research, and Harvard has a leading study on longevity, and they've looked at what are the factors that promote longevity. And it's by far number one is the quality of connections and relationship in one's lives. So that has proven to be more effective or more correlate to longevity and living a long life than the health factors that we might think, like smoking or diabetes or unhealthy lifestyles. For the promotion of long-term health, social connection is number one.
Hmm. Do you find with high performers they lack that?
I think we can get really lulled by busyness and running around. And in that, if there is not time for connection and quality interaction, yes.
Mm. Yeah, the high performers I've met in my time, they fall into two camps. They're on the one hand, they seem to be able to do it all. They've got awesome family. They're really balanced. They work doesn't completely consume them, whatever their avenue is, and they're balanced individuals. And then you've got the other side where they're maniacally focused and they are amazing at their thing, right? Be it business, sport, whatever. But everything else around them is a complete mess. Kids don't see the
Mhm.
kids. They don't have good relationships in their life. They, no real close friends, and it just seems to be either or. And obviously, there's people balancing them. But I
Yeah.
imagine,
Workaholism is what workism or workaholism is what that how we
yes,
would describe that when it becomes unilateral focus. And, high achieving doesn't necessarily mean spending all of your time. There are people that do it that are high achievers and are successful that aren't spending all of their time, because some of this is time distribution and energy management, that when we're doing one thing, there's an opportunity cost that we're not doing something else.
mm, mm. I'm curious how do high performers who fall in that workaholism bracket that you work with, which I'm sure there are some, how do they react to the idea that more social connection would make them perform at a higher level?
Honestly, what I would say is the true workaholics aren't necessarily coming to coaching.
Mm, yeah, there's a
So
problem.
I think people, because I'm a psychologist and sort of a hybrid, I think people that come to me for coaching know that, and they know that I operate out of a whole person approach. And yes, plenty of those people will come and say, I want to get this promotion, and we can have an aspiration for that, but that isn't going to be a goal of coaching, because there are variables there that we don't have control over.
Mm, yes. Okay.
So the people that are like truly at the end of that spectrum, I'm not sure that they are pursuing coaching. I
Mm,
might get people in kind of recovery from it.
yeah. Okay.
But if
So,
people are coming to coaching, they're somewhat motivated to make a change, right? Or to make a shift. Here's the other thing that I'll throw in there. A lot of the stuff that we do in coaching, people do already know. So there's this old philosophical term called acrasia, which is like the tendency to go against one's better judgment. So there's always this question about the human condition of, why do we self-sabotage? There really isn't a lack of information right now out there about how to have a better life, or how to feel happy, or how to be healthier or whatnot. So what is it? Why do we do things that we know we shouldn't do? And why do we not do the things we know that we should do? So a lot of times it's like it doesn't make any sense. And it's just part of being human. And so, having an accompaniment, having somebody on the journey with us helps, whether it's a coach, a mentor, a manager, a significant other, or whatnot.
mm.
Um, but
Well, that
there are two things I say that don't work in coaching. And one of them is if people show up and say, I don't know, Karen, what do you think I should work on? Because what I think doesn't matter. So people have to have some sort of a gap, even if it's
mm,
just, I want to feel better about this problem. But if they ask me, I could say you should go take pickleball lessons, because that's really fun.
it is fun, to be fair. I mean, wouldn't be a bad
It is
suggestion.
fun.
Yeah, but I get so you're not there to be the GPS. You're there to be the rudder. Oh, sorry,
I'm there to,
the stabilizer.
well, how I see it is, yes, I'm there to hopefully help people make the change that they want to make. And if it's not a healthy change, I won't be involved in the process. Um, and to deepen their self-awareness, and
Mm,
help them know that they matter and that they're not alone. I mean, even just being listened to and being heard is kind of a lost thing. Unfortunately, we're all interrupted and distracted. And I mean, I can't tell you the number of times that in a coaching conversation, somebody will say after half an hour, like, I can't remember the last time anybody listened to what I have to say or that I talked about myself for that long.
I think the irony is if, everyone wants to be heard, right? But I think the way to be heard is to listen and actually pay attention, and then people reciprocate back. My partner's she's the most unbelievable listener. And early on in our relationship, it highlighted how bad a listener I was. So yeah, constant work on that one. Karen, just some quick fire ones to finish. I'm conscious of time, if I may.
Yes, great.
Great. So in the last 2-3 years, what's been the biggest practice, tool, or intervention? Could be anything from a health intervention, could be a new diet, or whatever, that's had the biggest impact on your life?
In my life?
In your life.
Yes. I would say a couple things. I really believe in cohort-based development. So in the last couple of years, and now I have 5 kids. So, for a long time, I didn't have a lot of extra time for myself. And so now that my kids are a little older, I've said, okay, I'm 50. I'm going to make a shift. I'm going to learn some new things. And so I've brought new activities into my life in community with others. So one is I started playing pickleball. So I have friends that I play pickleball with multiple times a week, and I can play with my family. So I consider it a multiplier. So a multiplier is like, I'm getting outside, I'm getting exercise, I'm learning a new skill, I'm getting in a flow state, which is a resilience driver, and I'm spending time with people I care about. So all of that has made a change in my quality of life. So it sounds simple, and it is simple, yet I was very intentional about how I brought that in.
It's wonderful.
So, and I have two. Yeah, go ahead.
No, please go. I was just going to echo your. I was going to echo pickleball and actually doing community-based things that are fun. And it's a bleak way to get social connection, right?
Yeah, and because it isn't just about pickleball. Whatever, fill in the blank of whatever your softball league or whatever, that's help. It's important for flourishing. So I'm engaged in volunteer work. I've always been in COVID. We got out of it a little bit, and fostering that sense of purpose and making sure that I'm always wanting to be in service of others is really important for well-being and fulfillment. So I've become a little more organized about that again. And I picked up one other new thing, learning to play Mahjong. So I meet with my friends every week, play this game. It isn't about the Mahjong, but it is about getting together with people and not getting into my pajamas by 7 p.m., but actually doing something that is not work, and it's constructive and generative and just simply fun, just for the sake of it. Those are the changes that I've made.
Well, yeah, wonderful changes. I think more people should play more games with people they love, right? It's just fun. For the sake of fun. No end to it, right? Just infinite games.
Yes, more play.
More play.
I'm like a worker too. I mean, I can get really hooked on my work. I love what I do. I love it. Yet it is really important to disconnect and engage in other things.
A guy called Will Durant, who wrote, he summarized human history with his wife. And in one of his last books, he said, humans are weird. Let us pray should be let us pray. Let us pray should be let us play. And I thought that always stuck with me. It's a wonderful instruction of what we should do. Karen, last question for you.
We forget how to play. There's so much to be learned from watching kids. They're mindful, they're present, and they're playful. And it seems like as we get older, we can forget about that.
Well, you've got 5 of them, so I'm sure you've had a lot to watch.
Yeah, my kids have been teachers in many ways for me.
Yeah, I'm sure.
All 5 of them little learning partners.
Yes, yes. I don't have any kids yet, but maybe one day. We'll see. Um,
Mhm.
Karen, is there any idea or phrase or quote you try and live your life by?
Well, I don't know if I could boil it down into a phrase, but part of my mantra, my mission, my purpose, I don't know, is to help more people flourish. So, and when I say flourish or psychological fitness, flourish is just to help all of us get past neutral state, obviously get out of red zone pain state, past neutral state, and get to flourishing. And flourishing, I think of as being connected, being, healthy and having well-being and having a sense of purpose.
Well, I
So
think
that's
you're
what I think.
well, it's a wonderful answer, and I think if people like your answer and want to dive into it more, I think you cover a lot of it in a bit more depth in your book. So, one, where can we find you? Where can we find your book, and where can people keep up with your work?
Yes, thank you. So I'm on LinkedIn. Find me there. My website is Karen. It's drkarendoll.com, DOLL. And I facilitate the Harvard University Flourishing at Work network, and people are always welcome to join us for those meetings too, which is people, thought leaders come together and talk about anything related to flourishing at work. It's really interesting and fun and open source based and has a lot of fascinating people and good ideas.
Wonderful. Well, we can put the links in the show notes to Flourishing at Work and to where we can find you. And just lastly, for me, thank you so much for doing this. I really enjoyed talking to you, and yeah, it was really fun and learned lots. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben, and I appreciate the work that you're doing. You're educating a lot of people on important things.